Good afternoon.
Hey Peter, how you going?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
All right. Is that an Australian accent?
It is indeed. I am in Brisbane at the
That's
moment.
nice. That's very nice. You're behind me or are you in front of me? I can't remember.
I'm 7:01 a.m. Tuesday morning. So ahead of you, I think.
Yeah. No, I think we're on the same
We're on the
timeline. I don't
same
know why
timeline
that is,
now.
but that's
Sweet.
okay. That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. I've been dealing with so many American accents. It's nice to hear a native one.
I was like, oh, when the option came through, I was like, they'll appreciate that, surely.
Yes. Well, you won't have to ask why I'm scared of spiders. That's for
I
sure.
mean, yeah, that was
Any
gonna
native
be,
Australian knows why.
yeah, like that was actually like my first question because I mean, I think the threat and sheer size of them is sort of like it hits us differently than I think it does America. Like, does that stem from the environment? Does it stem from a fear? Or is it just like we don't have enough killer spider movies? Or is it all three?
It's all three. It's funny that you named literally all three of the things. Um, I think it does stem a little bit from environment. Like I think when you grow up with huntsmen, which are
Mhm.
massive, and the threat of the funnel web, like which can kill you. Like
Yeah.
my parents, for as long as I can remember, have reminded me that I can die if I'm bitten by a big hairy black eight-legged thing,
Mm.
and I think that's kind of made its way into my psyche. I was also bitten apparently by a black spider when I was like 2 or 3 years old. My mother tells me, and that's probably where the arachnophobia stems from.
Yeah.
Some people I think are just naturally arachnophobic. I'm one of
Yeah.
them. Like anything with eight legs, I distrust immediately. Like I'm not even like a massive fan of squids. Like I think squids and spiders are aliens. Um, but also, yeah, I do have to say, like the original impetus for making the film was based on arachnophobia. Like a spider the size of a bulldog was the scariest thing I could think of for myself.
Mm.
But also, like one of the things once I cottoned onto the idea that really gave me, energy and wings was there really isn't that many great giant spider horror films,
Yeah.
which doesn't make sense because spiders are pretty roundly like
Terrifying.
primal in
Yeah.
that a large subsection of the community is terrified of them. So yeah, I thought there'd be more, which is why I made one.
Yeah. I mean, because I look at it and I'm like, arachnophobia and Eight-Legged Freaks are kind of the only two movies that I can think of. And now we have Sting, and like I'm the same. Like I hate spiders. I don't care when people say huntsmans are not dangerous. I'm like, I don't care. They're giant. I had one land on me in the shower once, and I'm like, I never like I yeah.
Yeah,
So I think
it's the worst.
this film, like, it's so much fun, but at the same time, I'm like, oh, like it's just it makes me uncomfortable, which is what you want, like big creature features to be. And like when it came to the design of the spider, was there like a particular one that you looked at as like this is what we're going to base this off of, or did you grab sort of bits and pieces of everything? Because I mean, it looks red backy looking at it.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's basically a redback with a dog's mouth. That's what
yeah,
it is. And I figured they'd kind of already done Shelob. Shelob looks like a big, scary, giant car-sized funnel web.
yeah.
Um, and my probably my favorite horror film of all time, maybe top three, but I certainly have drawn inspiration from it like constantly as Alien, and
Yeah.
I just love that reflective black exoskeleton that the Geiger creature had, and to me the red back was more interesting as a monster, as an alien monster.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, but yeah, that was the thinking was that look, you don't really need to change the design of a spider much because they're
Mm.
already like terrifying. It's the same with a shark. Like I'm doing a great white shark movie at the moment. I'm doing a World War II killer shark movie, and you just don't need to change the design. Like a shark is basically a giant swimming trash can with teeth. Like that's pretty scary,
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
let's just go with the original.
I'm
Same with
now
Sting.
I'm now very excited to see what you're going to do with the shark movie, knowing what you do with spiders and zombies, obviously with Wormwood. That's yeah, I mean, I was like, if you can make them scarier than they already are, then by all means.
That's the job. Yeah, that's the job, is to take a scary thing and try and make it scarier than it could possibly be. So yeah, that's what we've tried to do here. But I always try to add a bit of humor too. I'm not a big fan of just out and out bleak horror. Like I like
Yeah.
my favorite horrors, or my favorite sort of area or genre of cinema for horror is probably the sort of 80s Spielbergian Jaws Poltergeist kind of thing, where you set
Mm.
up like a warm family and people that are likable, and you have snatches of humor. The way Hitchcock would always pepper his films with humor, but it'd have a thriller spine.
Yeah.
I like that, which is not to say that I don't adore a film like Hereditary, which is just like from start to finish emotional bleakness and people screaming at each other, and it's like the worst, most depressing Ingmar Bergman film with demons. It's like, oh my god. But yeah, I don't really, I couldn't make that. I like humor in my horror too much.
Yeah. I mean, that was the thing that I liked about this is that it very much was like, as much as we're going to scare the shit out of you, we are going to make you laugh. But like with your love of the genre, like, do you find it's becoming easier to like execute scares and create atmosphere on screen the more that you make them?
No, it's heaps harder
Yeah.
because audiences are becoming not just cinephiles but horrorphiles. Now they
Yeah.
know how a jump scare should be constructed. So if you land a bad jump scare, mate, like they let you know.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it's a lot more difficult, but it's like the internet. Like the internet has made it a lot more difficult um, to be successful as a filmmaker because of all the piracy, but
Mhm.
it's made you 1,000 times more accessible. So you can become a filmmaker like that. It's just harder to make a living. And so with the proliferation of horror films, it's a lot easier to become a horror filmmaker, but it's hard to become a great one now because there's so many great ones.
Yeah. And with like with I mean, when watching this, I was like, I love that Noni Hazelhurst was in there because I feel like we don't see her like enough in films. And like, and then it's also Noni Hazelhurst with an accent. Like, was it always intended to be an American set film?
The location was arbitrary. We sort of back and forth a while about whether or not it was probably we needed it to be a big, recognizable city because we
Yeah.
wanted it to be a very inclusive story. My thing on horror is what I like to do is to create like a sort of international fairy tale.
Mm.
Like I like that structure. Like I like to have sort of fairy tale templates or very fairy tale like characters and inject them into like a horror landscape in a modern context. That's kind of my favorite thing. And so the accents were just like basically me trying to make a classic fairy tale. I'm like, everybody in a fairy tale seems to kind of do that. Like they all seem to be from different parts of the fairy tale universe. And, I also was thinking, when I grew up, there were accents. So I'm from Sydney. So I grew up with, Korean and Greek accents and Italian accents and, people from, Serbia and then the normal whiteys and a lot of indigenous people. So to me, like I like the internet, like I like the cultural boiling pot.
Mm.
So I guess I was kind of thinking of that too. But yeah, Noni plays just like a classic fairy godmother,
Yeah.
and Robin plays the evil godmother. You know what I mean? Like they're fairy tale archetypes.
Yeah.
And I wanted them to have an otherness even within the New York landscape. So I wanted them to feel like they were from a distant planet almost.
Yeah.
And so that's what my thinking was. But Noni's great. Like I've been watching Noni since I was a kid, which she hates to be reminded of. But I had a massive crush on Noni when I used to watch her on Play School, and so to work with her was fantastic. So I remembered her from these wonderful children's things that she did as a kid.
Yeah.
But I think she's one of the great actors in Australia, and it's really fun to put her into something really serious.
It's great that also you get to sort of say play school and not have to explain what it is because I'm like, oh yeah, well, like every Australian grew up watching it, so it's like I feel too Americans might be like, the hell is that? So yeah, I mean, I'm the same.
Yeah, I'd have to
I'm
go
like,
through a whole explanation. Like, there's a spinning clock, and behind the clock is an amazing. They're like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Like, oh, I shouldn't have mentioned it. Yeah.
and like there is obviously it's a predominantly Australian cast, but then you get Jermaine Fowler in there. Like, was it always a
Mm.
case of like it was whoever you got for the movie was like there was no specific like we need an American actor, or like did you just
Oh yeah, no, I mean, yeah, there's always that conversation. They're like,
yeah
okay, cast a bunch of legends from Australia who we all love,
yeah
but then try and get an American celebrity. Like that's the casting thing. And just in this case, I just lucked out in that I got Jermaine, who's a great actor and a
Mm,
great comedian, but also as soon as he arrived, I realized he was like a horror nerd.
mm,
And like him and me just went off on long tangents about John Carpenter and Ridley Scott, and we started talking about like the latest films from I mean, whomever,
yeah
so it was great to be able to just sit down and talk to him about, what's your favorite? Is it Get Out? Is it Us? Is it Nope? We just went down a Jordan Peele hole and just talked for like 45 minutes about Jordan Peele. And I just went, oh, I've got this guy, I think this is going to be a long friendship. So I'm immediately trying to develop something else with Jermaine because we're both 100% in the same mindset for horror.
yeah
So yeah, I think I found a fellow soldier in Jermaine.
yeah nice. No, like as yeah him his presence sort of like I think he elevates the comedic aspect as well, and you realize like, oh, this film is completely in on the joke. It's like winking at itself, like it knows that it's a horror movie, but it also knows that it's having fun, because like there are scenes in this that like yeah, like it was terrifying to watch, and then you'd be like laughing, and I'm like, okay, like I got the gist of what this movie is going for. And as you said, like it was like that 80s inspire, which is like I feel like we don't have enough of that, where it's just movies just going really bold and over the top, but also being very respectful of the genre as well.
Yeah, the Jordan was a bit of a genre Swiss Army knife in a way. Like it's great because when he arrives, you're like, oh, this is the comedy foil, but
Mm,
then he kind of turns into the detective,
mm,
and he takes that role seriously, and you believe him in it. And then towards the end, he sort of becomes like a bit of an action hero for a while. And he fell into that role really beautifully. He does his own stunts. He moves really well. He's got like he can project an anger and a sort of violence that's really fun too. So he does a lot. Um, yeah, he definitely earned his paycheck. Like he really helped the film. Every time he jumps on screen, he does elevate the fun aspect, which
yeah,
is a huge thing for me. I think that's important for horror. It's something John Carpenter always did really well.
yeah. And with the spider itself, like how much of this was CGI and how much of this was like a practical effect? Because there were times that I was like, I'm not entirely sure what's what.
That's great. I'm glad that's the problem you had. Yeah, I think in the end it was weirdly 50-50.
Yeah,
My original idea was to keep the CGI to an absolute minimum. But
yeah,
then when you realize there's actually a lot of interaction you need to have with the little girl and the little version of the spider.
mm,
And because the little version of the spider, it was all wide shots, there was no way to puppet that.
mm,
Um, it had to be digital. And I tried to sort of hide it in shadow and backlight and through big, thick panes of glass as much as I could because I didn't want to be just staring at a CG creature for too long.
mm,
But Cumulus created a photorealistic spider that was, yeah, much better than I thought it was going to be. I have an inherent distrust of digital when it comes to horror, but those guys did such a good job. And then the rest of it is all, the Richard Taylor Weta puppet, which was like a dream come true to be able to finally work with, with a Richard Taylor puppet after all these years of watching behind the scenes of Lord of the Rings and stuff. And
yeah,
yeah, I think horror is a tactile medium, and you need as much puppetry as you can. So if you're going to shoot a movie about zombies, you dress somebody as a zombie, and then you trust that a human being is going to pull it off. And I think if you're going to have a giant spider, you need to make a puppet, and you need to have that thing, like clawing at the actors and, coming right up into their face so that they've got something to react to. And,
yeah,
the beast then is interacting with the light and the shadow and, the condensation, and interacting with props. And I think the human mind knows the difference. There's no real uncanny valley thing that sets in when
mm,
you're looking at a puppet. You've got to shoot it right so that people don't think it's a puppet, and
mm.
you've only got to have it on the screen for just fractions of seconds, and you can usually pull it off.
Yeah. And with the, as you were saying, like with the actors interacting with it, like is it one of those things where when you're doing like the scene and you realize, okay, the actors are going to be caught in the webs and it's going to have like whatever it's spitting out, are you sort of like, oh, have I potentially like bitten off more than I can chew, when you realize just how big the animatronic or the puppet is and what the actors have to do with it? Like, is it a case of you always kind of knew where it was going to go? Or was there ever a case when you went, oh, wow, this puppet is more than I was expecting it to be?
Um, No, I knew it was going to be hard. I mean, I've
Yeah.
studied enough and I've watched enough behind the scenes, and I've done enough shooting to know what I'm going to have to go through. So we were very careful in planning every shot where the puppet was involved, and
Mhm.
Weta actually enacted every frame of the spider that I wanted to happen over in New Zealand before they even sent the puppet over to Australia. They had kind of shown me ways of doing everything that I'd wanted to do.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, the hard part is I thought, you go, oh, for every time we've got the puppet, I'll have at least half a day to, kind of hopefully work that out. I know back in the 80s and 90s and, whatever, they probably would have, spent days on those sequences. But, I'd at least have half a day. But with budgets and schedules these days, sometimes like I'd get to the end of the day and, the first AD would be like, okay, man, we got an hour and a half to do 4 puppet shots. And I'm like,
Mm.
how? Like I've got 25 minutes to do a puppet shot. Like, do you have any idea how? And you're just looking at me going, dude, this is what we've got. I mean, that's even with overtime. So I'd be racing to get the puppet shots done, and you can't. That's like racing to do really fine needlework. Like you can't.
Mm.
It's really difficult, and that I think is the hardest part about being a filmmaker now. Is the ambition is almost bigger than it ever was, because you're going off all these amazing things that have happened, in the last 100 years of cinema. The ambition of the audience, like the audience expects every film to be as good as a Nolan film. It's
Mm.
insane.
Yeah.
But then the budgets have shrunk to like, less than an eighth of what they were, 10 years ago. And so you've got, you don't have the money you need and you don't have the time you need. So you've got to be really good at working with a B movie budget and schedule, but
Mm.
producing A movie elevated results. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's a pretty hard job, you know.
Well, I
But
think
it's so fun. It's so fun. Don't get me
yeah,
wrong. Like I still would rather do this than anything else.
I've always thought that like horror movies, I feel like would be one of the more fun sort of sets to be on, especially when it comes to like, a movie like yours where it's, when you're getting dressed up as zombies or you've got a giant spider and there's just like blood and carnage kind of like thrown at you. Like it's always one of those things where I'd be like, oh, I'd love to be an extra and just get like, you know, bloodied and everything like that. And like when, as you were saying, you were speaking to Jermaine about like, just genre movies, like, is there one for you, or like, was there one for you that like kickstarted the love of horror when you first saw it?
Well, there's the sort of holy trinity or quadrilogy, The Exorcist, The Thing, Jaws, and Alien. Like
Yeah,
they're the big ones. But
yeah,
like it's really films like Peter Jackson's first film, Bad Taste,
bad taste. Yeah,
and
yeah,
Sam Raimi's really Evil Dead 2. Even though Evil Dead 1, you look at that and you're just like, oh my God, it's possible.
yeah,
Those are the films that really pushed me to pick up a video camera and do something, because
yeah,
I just could never come close to Ridley Scott. But with my little video camera or my Hi8 camera back in the 90s, like I could approximate like Bad Taste.
yeah.
And so that was the thing. Those were the films that actually got me moving, and got me making films.
No, I'm excited to see this with an audience because I know that's playing at the Gold Coast Film Festival here. So I'm gonna go see it again because I was like, I need to see this with like an audience and get that reaction to some of those shots, especially Australian audiences who will completely understand like the sheer terror of what you put on screen. So yeah,
I'm coming up for the Gold Coast one. If
oh,
you're going
you
to be
are?
there, come say hello.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sweet. Absolutely, for sure. Yeah, like now I'm after Wormwood and this, and now you've got a shark movie. I'm like, yeah, let's keep going. Like, I'm just want you to tackle every single fear on screen.
Anything that can kill me. Yeah, I'm basically working my way through the creatures. I've done zombies, demons, giant spiders. Now I'm doing giant sharks and
Yeah.
I'm riding a killer alien thing. So I'm just working my way through, you know.
Yeah, I'm excited for all of it. So no, thank you so much for taking the time out, and yeah, I'll definitely hit you up on the Gold Coast for sure.
Fantastic. Thanks, Peter.
No
I'll see you
worries.
in Queensland.
Cheers, sounds good.
See you, mate.